There was continual warfare between the north and the south, the two kings, Jeroboam in the north and Rehoboam in the south. The conflict, however, shifts gears markedly with the rise of Ahab and the queen Jezebel. And God raises up perhaps the greatest prophet of all, at least in the thinking of our Jewish brothers and sisters, Elijah. And Elijah stands up before the people of God in the northern kingdom in Israel and declares to them, "You have been unfaithful because Ahab and Jezebel have reinstituted worship in the high places, the Asherahs and the Baals." And then Elijah says, "Come and gather with me on Mount Carmel and bring with you the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." And there is a confrontation as Elijah tells them, "Cut up a bull and set it on fire," and they can't do it. And then he says, "Why don't you douse it with water before I have a chance?" And they douse the wood and the sacrifice, and the fire comes, and the prophets of Baal and the Asherah are all destroyed. Judgment of God? Consequence? It's a good question. But the interesting thing is that out of this great success will come the personal crisis of Elijah. He will fear for his life and flee to a cave in a mountain. And there he will wait for God to speak. And God will come in, not in the thunder and the lightning, but in the small whisper that follows them. And Elijah will hear once again the promise of God that God will not leave him alone, but God has preserved a faithful remnant. And Elijah will continue until there comes a time when he will reach out and mentor another great prophet, Elisha. And Elisha will watch and receive the cloak of Elijah as Elijah does not die but is taken into heaven by the chariot of heaven. Elisha will raise a child from the dead and prefigure the coming of Jesus Christ. They will be calling the people of God back to the God who alone is God. But they're not alone. There are two, we call them minor prophets only because their works are short. Two incredible prophets that speak to Israel. One is Amos. Amos does a wonderful job of speaking against the kingdoms around Israel that have oppressed and been in conflict. And you can almost hear the people of Israel hearing him saying, "Oh, that's terrific, go get him." And then, like a great angler, he sets the hook and says, "But you, O Israel, have torn away from God." But they will not come back to God. And then in perhaps the most startling of all of the Old Testament prophets, Hosea will take a cult prostitute for his wife at the direction of God. And then when she goes back and is sold into slavery, he will purchase her for a great price and take her back to himself. And Hosea will say, "Thus the Lord will be faithful to you, O Israel, and bring you back." The question, of course, is it the same God that destroys all the prophets or the priests of Baal and Asherah, who then speaks through Hosea a word of incredible grace? The Old Testament wants to suggest very strongly that justice and mercy are two sides of the same coin. Because without justice, there's not mercy. And without mercy, justice is merely oppression. Happy reading.